That's a really good question, because that answer is going to be in part context dependent. So general education in the US and in Europe and in Asia have common aspects to it, but they're going to be somewhat regionally decided. I think for here in Hong Kong, and what we saw, or what I saw a year ago, general education is probably here setting where much of the U.S., at least at the larger universities, are moving towards. It's moving away from the idea that it's a diluted down intro to the discipline piece into something that connects the discipline to the bigger world, or is a portal and entry by which students become engaged in the discipline on that. So I think it serves many purposes. I think here, as well in the U.S., it's also being deeply tied to student learning outcomes, and the learning outcomes are the sort of the real piece that our expectation about what a university educated person is. There's some really useful pieces in terms of commonalities and differences. So one of the commonalities that's emerging, because at the University of Maryland we just passed in April a new general education program, and so one of the commonalities that I see is that we have something now called the I courses, which are thematic courses that are focused on problems and issues, and that is pretty common, and it's at the new GE outlines across the 8 Hong Kong universities, so that's a commonality. A regional one is that for here in Hong Kong, and probably for Asia as it moves, and I would say Macau and maybe eventually into mainland, is the idea of the Chineseness. And that, and what does it mean to be Chinese in that piece? And that's not something that's going to be in the U.S., and we don't have something comparable. We don't have a GE requirement of what is it to be American on that. We have, ours is sort of focused on pluralistic societies and cultural competencies now, what used to be called diversity. So that's a regional difference. And I think that is in part at the root of part of what the GE movement is and why it came about in Hong Kong. My recollection is, I mean, this came about not because the system was broke, but because there was a need for people to have deeper connections and the ability to move across knowledges quicker, and the ability to move into new knowledge evolution pieces. So that really does get at it, and that's why the idea of having a general education, while it's the sociology 0.1, doesn't work, because it's about these connections and new knowledges and new knowledge connections. I think I would sort of rephrase that. I think that the new faculty members for the 21st century, and the expectation I think everywhere, is that there needs to be a better understanding of the grounding in terms of how people learn, how pedagogy works, and how that education, the difference between teaching and learning and their connectiveness. Unfortunately, in the US and probably many other places, we turn out people with PhDs. We expect that they can teach, but they really have had no understanding in terms of sort of the grounding and how this whole process occurs, with, of course, the exception of those that have PhDs in education and cognitive, but the vast majority don't. What I'm seeing, and I think the UK actually was the first to start it, is this idea that all incoming faculty, new faculty, should undergo some sort of training on that. And I know that's beginning to occur here in Hong Kong, and I think Hong Kong is ahead of the US in this. I don't know of any cases in the US that I know of where this is a requirement or a linked or a clear expectation. That's clearly the case at a number of institutions here in Hong Kong.
They're making a big change.
It's a big change, but at Maryland and at the Center for Teaching Excellence, we've been aware of this for a long time, because we have a fairly robust and faculty development program for graduate students. That's actually where to fix it. That's where it should be to do it. It's about 20, 30 hours worth of time. That's when you spread that out. and then they come in understanding. Of course, in the U.S., we have, at big universities like the University of Maryland, many of our graduate students teach, and in many programs, teaching is an expectation of part of the graduate training. So that's one way to approach it long term. The short term is that entering faculty to ground them in just basic pedagogy and understanding. It's all out there. It's been out there for a long time.